All right, let's welcome into Straight Fire a guy you know. He's been covering the NFL forever, Sports Illustrated, and he now is Amazon's newest sideline reporter for the big Thursday night games. Albert Breer, how are you, my man?
I think sideline reporter is probably wrong. I'm not. I'm not.
Well,
I'm not infringing on Kaylee's turf here. I guess I'd be their insider. A little
so
different, but
insider,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
insider.
There
It's
you
just
go.
even better. A little step
Yeah,
up as an insider.
yeah.
That's awesome, man. Congrats. How do you like it so far?
It's good. It's good. I mean, the crew's awesome. I like getting to know Carissa better, and then like I knew Fitz as a player a little bit, and Witt and Sherm, and then getting to know Tony Gonzalez, and there are a few guys there who I knew from NFL Network, Spoon, Mike Mariano, like who I just.
Mm.
It's made the whole thing really, really easy. It's a great group. And, I actually said this to a couple of the guys a couple of years ago when I first saw them on TV. It really, I think it comes across how they genuinely like each other. And, that's been my experience working there now too, in the short time that I've worked there. Like, well, it just seems like a really good team, at least so far. I guess you got to give it
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
but yeah, so far so good, no
Well, you guys
question.
got a big one this week. Jets,
Yep.
Patriots. I'm sure you'll probably are you travel you're traveling, right?
So I'm doing some of the games and then
Okay.
some of the games from here in my home studio. So this is one I will be doing from here. It'll be kind of, I think, about half and half.
Okay.
So be on the road for some, and then doing some from the comfort of this office that I built out during COVID for these sorts of situations.
Yeah, pretty sick office. I got to upgrade mine if you're watching. I got, we moved, so I don't have as much stuff on the walls. Anyways, we'll get to Jets Patriots. I do want to go
Mhm.
big picture first,
Yep.
Albert. 2 weeks in, we got a couple quarterback injuries with Tua and Jordan Love. We got a lot of injuries to wide receivers and running backs. And I don't know. I mean, you never want to go too overboard, but I think pretty much the biggest surprises in the league would probably have to be the Saints, the
Yeah.
Vikings, Seahawks, all 2-0. I don't think everybody had
Mhm.
them pegged as 2-0. Maybe the Seahawks with the schedule, but I don't know.
Yeah.
What was your big takeaway first 2 weeks of the league?
Yeah, I mean, the Saints have been eye-opening what they've done, 91 points in the first 2 weeks. And that's not like bloated by defensive touchdowns or kick returns or anything like that. Like it's a legitimate number. And I think the score over the first 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, is I mean, I can't remember what it was 30-3, right? And then 20-0. Is it 50-3 over the first 2 weeks? Or am I
Sounds
getting
about that might be
I
right.
think that's right. Either that or that's the Panthers score against. I can't, it's one or
Uh-huh.
the other.
Yeah, Panthers.
I don't have it in front of me, but they've been super impressive. And I think what is so interesting about it is that like they did things one way for such a long time there. Um, you know, Obviously Sean Payton's way worked, right? But when they started to look at offensively where they were a few years out from the Sean Payton era, I think what Dennis Allen and the guys there found, the front office people there found was, we've because Sean can handle could create it and generate it, and because Drew Brees could handle it, sort of similar to New England, they kept adding and adding and adding to the offense and never subtracting, right? Which played to Drew Brees' strengths over the years, and so it became very complicated, very tangled up. And like this offseason, I think part of the reason they made the change and the coordinator was like, let's untangle that, right? Pete Carmichael had still been there, a really, really
Mhm.
good coach, had worked under Sean Payton for all those years, and they wanted to untangle the offense. And now, in going in on the Shanahan McVay style of offense with Clint, the whole concept is like we're going to take on all of the like we make it easy for the players, make it hard on the opponent by taking on the mental load as coaches, and that's by formationing and motioning and doing all of these different things to create the illusion of complexity. And God, it's worked. You know what I mean? Like Derek Carr looks great. You have all of these guys who are 4-3 guys in that offense, Kamara and Olave, that are just speed demons that are now playing to their speed.
Mhm.
Um, just a lot of fun to watch. Now is it sustainable? We'll see. But I think Clint Kubiak's a really good coach, and I guess the downshot is that like now he might only be there for a year, right? If this keeps going.
Well, it's
But he's done
interesting
a
you
great
mentioned.
job.
Yeah. So
Huh?
Kubiak came from San Fran. He was the passing game coordinator, right?
Yeah, his story is interesting. Obviously, everybody knows the name. His
Hmm.
dad was the head coach of the Broncos and the Texans and won a Super Bowl in Denver. And his path has been like really interesting. He was in with Mike Zimmer for a bunch of years and had ascended to becoming the coordinator, winds up getting fired there, then goes and jumps on the staff at Denver with Nathaniel Hackett for the
Mm.
single year. They all get fired. And then he goes to San Francisco and works with Kyle. And so, where he had been sort of a rising name, got caught in a couple of circumstances where he winds up on fired staffs and, then has to go back and kind of reset and gets to work for Kyle for a year. Which by the way worked for Sam Darnold pretty well too, I would say.
Yes,
Get the year with
indeed.
Kyle, but he got the year there. And talking to Dennis Allen about it on Sunday night after they beat the Cowboys, he really liked that Clint had some scars and then Clint had been knocked down a little bit. And, like I think the concept is like all the things that made him a rising name in the first place, that's all still there.
Mhm.
He was just kind of in a couple bad situations. And now, it's not like he's not the same guy. But he had the chance to learn from that stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think Clint's an interesting name and, certainly the way this stuff works, this J Mac, like this keeps going. You know how we're going to be talking about
Yeah.
him in November and December. It won't be as the Saints offensive coordinator. It'll be as somebody else's next head coach.
Exactly. Now this is interesting because he's from the Shanahan tree. I guess we'll call him a Shanahan guy. He was there last year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's about as much from the Shanahan tree as anybody could be, right? Because of his dad.
That's right, the dad. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: if you look at the last four drafts and every quarterback taken from 21, 22, 23, and 24,
Yep.
there's an argument that only two quarterbacks in the last four drafts are working. That would be
Stroud.
CJ Stroud, and the other one, shockingly, is Brock Purdy. What do they have in common? Both are playing in a
That
Shanahan
system.
system. Okay. That's
So does
scary.
that mean Jacksonville needs to hire Clint?
Well, I was I was gonna say maybe Brian Dable or something, but I think we could say something's up around the league. None of these quarterbacks. You look at 21. Zach Wilson
Yeah.
traded, Lance
I
traded, Fields, Mac, everybody.
so
It's crazy.
I think there's something to that, and we can talk about Sam in this context too. But, I think the beauty of that system is it's so quarterback friendly, right? Like there are certain things. So, for example, like the Patriot offense, like that Brady ran forever, the way Peyton Manning did it, the quarterback in those systems is being asked to make Mike points, to set protections, to do all of this different stuff before the snap. And the Shanahan offense doesn't ask the quarterback to do that. The Shanahan offense takes a lot of that off the quarterback. Protection calls and a lot of those sorts of systems, like in a lot of iterations of that system, are made by the center, right? And they'll go to the line. And in a lot of cases, they have what they call as cans, where they can change the play, and they'll go to they'll come out of the huddle with two play calls. And if you see this safety doing this, or you see this corner doing this, or you see man coverage here, then it's this. But if it's zone coverage, it's this. And it's just it takes so much of the mental load off the quarterback. It allows him to play fast. Now, why does that matter more now than ever? Because the offenses these guys are coming out of in college, you know, and it really goes back to the high school level and the spread offenses and how these things have been simplified at the lower levels of the game. It's just what Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur and Mike McDaniel, what those guys do is super conducive to what's coming out of the college game, right?
Wow.
So these guys are coming out of the college game and the learning curve steeper because the offenses they're running are a little simpler and because they're playing less in general. Like Purdy played a lot in college.
Yeah.
Like CJ Stroud was a 3-year guy. And he
Right. That's a
started a
good
bunch
point.
of games, but he only played for 3 years. Like if you look at the age gap with some of these guys, right? So when Michael Penix graduated high school, Drake May, Caleb Williams, and JJ McCarthy were freshmen.
Mm.
That's the age gap, and they're all in the same draft class, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times these guys are spending less time in college. They're in simpler systems. And so when they get to the pros, I think it's got to almost be one or the other. It's either you're in a system that is that way or you have to sit, you know?
Mm.
And so,
Oh
like in
boy.
a lot of cases, these guys are going to systems like this, and it's like, okay, like this system is set up for me to hit the ground running. Having good players with you helps too,
Yeah.
which CJ Stroud had that. We didn't know it at the time.
We did not.
We did not know how good Nico Collins was going to be at the
No.
time. We didn't know how good Tank Dell was going to be. He's got Steph there now. Obviously, we knew what Brock Purdy had when he was a rookie in San Francisco, but having good players around you helps a lot too.
So that's interesting that you say that the Shanahan system simplifies things. Well, this is obvious. Why haven't other offensive coordinators looked around the league and said, "Hey, let's do that"? Well, I
Well,
mean,
I
it just
think
seems very basic.
some some have tried and their systems aren't conducive to it, right? And then I'd say others, I think ego can get in the way
Yeah.
sometimes too. You know what I mean? Like it's just it's if things have worked for you in a certain way for such a long time, I
Yep.
mean sometimes it can be hard to detach yourself from it. Like
Oh.
and I'll use Adam Gase as an example, who
Oh no, please
I
don't.
think Adam's a damn good football coach. You know, I think he's done a lot of good things, but like if you look at it, he had his greatest success when Peyton Manning was the quarterback. Well, there's the obvious implication that of course you have success when Manning is the quarterback, but you also learn a lot when you work with a quarterback like that. So, you know, you build a system based on who Peyton is, and that system really works. And it's like, okay, like, well, I'm taking that system wherever I go. Then you go to
Mm.
Chicago where you have Jay Cutler, and okay, like now I've got Jay Cutler here, and Jay Cutler's been in the league for a while, and it works for Jay Cutler, who's a really smart quarterback. You know, then you go to Miami, and Tannehill's been around for a while, and it works a little bit. It's not quite the same, but it's
No.
okay. Then you go and you get with a young quarterback, and it's like you're trying to teach him
Yeah.
Mandarin. You know what I mean? Like, and Sam Darnold coming out was seen as somebody who was very raw. You know, like I think people have looked at like this avatar of the USC quarterback, which was Carson Palmer back in the day, which is like
Mm.
the pro-ready guy who played in the pro. That's not what USC was when Darnold was there. It was like a pure spread offense under Helton, under Clay Helton. You know what I mean?
Oh, I
Like
remember that guy.
it was like it was a very simple offense, and he is a guy who didn't like he only was there for 3 years, and so here he is, and he's walking that whole like seeing ghost thing. I felt horrible for him. There's
Yeah.
truth to it because there's truth to it. You know what I mean? Like it's the guy was coming and trying to run a system that was like it was like he's trying to teach a 300 class when he's actually a 100 level student at the time,
That's
you know?
tough one.
And so, like, I think, you know, I think what you're seeing is um, more and more like people are seeing the value in what Kyle Shanahan has always done. I mean, it worked for John Elway at the end of his career to do things this way. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think it's really helped a lot of young quarterbacks.
So let me ask, when you see historical numbers like we've never had more field goals in the first 2 weeks than
Mhm.
touchdowns, and we just had that. And our passing touchdowns fell off by like 30 from last year and like 50 from 2 years ago. I think this is all pretty much related, safe to say, to bad quarterback play.
Yeah.
Just the young quarterbacks just simply, it's sorry to be harsh, they
Mhm.
just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know. I think quarterback play is pretty good in the NFL right now. Actually,
Well,
like
okay, hold on. Let
there
me
is
ask this.
some bad, but there is, but you're right, you're right. Like I think what you're saying is when it's bad, it's really bad,
So like
right?
Falcons Eagles Monday, Albert. Before that final Kirk Cousins drive against passive Vic Fangio defense, Kirk Cousins was at like a buck 70 passing, and Jalen Hurts had like 175 or whatever it was.
Now in Cousins' defense, I think he had played pretty well. It was just their run game was really rolling.
The run game was rolling, but then you look around the league and there's like, and again, I know 300 is an arbitrary number, but like so few guys are passing for 300 yards anymore, and you're
Yeah,
like, what is it's got to be more than the too high shell which defenses have been throwing at for a
that's
couple
part of
years
it.
now.
I think that's part of it. Like, and I think like, you know, I remember having this conversation with Chip Kelly when he got to UCLA, right? And I asked him, you know, what he learned from being in the NFL, and his whole thing was like everything's won in the margins, right? Like everything's won in the margins, and everything is about situations where, like in college, third down and red zone and all that stuff matters. Like in the pros, it's everything, right? And like it's this big cat and mouse game where everybody's catching up to everybody constantly. And I said, well, some of the stuff that you did was revolutionary and has been adopted by people. Like people are doing some of the stuff that you were doing, and it's going to be in the NFL forever when it comes to the no huddle tempo stuff. Obviously, some of the spread run game stuff. And his answer was really interesting. He said to me, nothing's revolutionary in football. He's like, everything's evolutionary. He says a big circle. And then he brought this up to me. He goes, He goes, you know RPOs? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, a guy named Dutch Meyer ran them at TCU in the late 40s. And he's like, they just didn't call it that. Right. Like he's like, they didn't call them run pass options. But if you go back and you look and you can find the black and white tape, you'll find out that that's what they were running. And I think it was a good conversation for me to have because it really is what football is. You know, it's everybody doing one thing and then catching up to the next, right? Like
Mm.
the RPOs, if you remember, like when Nick Foles, and the Eagles won a Super Bowl with it in 2016. We saw the offensive explosion when you saw Andy Reid bringing in a lot of the concepts from the spread game. He had Chris Alt from Nevada on his staff for a while, and they were doing a lot of the movement, like stuff from the spread game, and they were unstoppable for a little while. You had that Rams Chiefs game. What was it, 2018, 17, 18, right in there, the
Was
one
that
in the
like
Coliseum.
54, 51 or something?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
The game, the Monday night game that was supposed to be in Mexico, and the
That's
turf
right.
wasn't good enough, so it got moved to LA. Um, like I just think these things go in ebbs and flows. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, and I think like we all look for some greater meaning in it, and the truth is, like in a lot of cases, it's just coaches caught up to certain things that are happening. So, you mentioned the Shanahan offense is all over the NFL. I haven't looked into this, but maybe that's what it is. Maybe there's an element of the Shanahan offense, of that style of offense, that people have caught up to, and it's affected the way that certain quarterbacks are playing. Um, I think more than anything else, that's what it is. Offenses will rebound because ultimately what will end up happening is if, defenses catch up to offenses, then offenses come up with a
Yeah,
counterpunch.
they've got to adapt.
Um,
Let
yeah.
me ask you quick about some news that just broke here recently. Tua's headed to the IR. Not a
Yeah.
major surprise. I saw he told your buddy Rappaport, or maybe it was through his agent or whatever, that he has no plans to retire.
Yep.
I did have just a dad that I know a little bit was telling me, hey, you should look into his contract because if he's not able to come back, I guess if he's not medically cleared, I guess the Dolphins get out of paying him or something interesting. But what's your best
Well,
guess on Tua? Is he done, or do you think he actually comes back? Because
no, I mean, let's start with the IR part of it, right? Which I think
okay,
with the IR part of what, like I thought the night it happened, I felt like they had to put him on IR.
yeah,
Takes him out for 4 weeks, right? I think what that does is it takes the pressure off of everybody. It takes the pressure off the team. It takes the pressure off of Tua. It just takes the pressure off the doctors, takes the pressure off of everybody. Like now, we don't need to rush anything. We don't
right.
need to make some sort of rash decision now. He can go get the information from the specialist. He can decompress. He can process everything. So I think that was the right first step, is to put him on injured reserve. Um, so now he's on injured reserve. So now it's next. Um, the contract part of it, like he would have to not be able to pass a fit. Like he would have to, for the injury guarantee to trigger, he would have to have doctors saying that he cannot physically go and play football anymore. Like it would have to be a legitimate career-ending injury. In a lot of cases like that, you would have a fight. Would there be a fight in this one? I don't know how the Dolphins would react if that were part of the equation. So that would be if he decided to retire. A lot of how the money would work would be whether or not it was a voluntary retirement or if a doctors felt like this forced him out of the game. Again, that can lead to a fight and everything else. If the injury trigger guarantee does trigger, then there's insurance that teams take out on players. That's part of the deal. And I mean, there's just a million things that'll make everybody out there's eyes glaze over on that.
Yeah.
Um, I think he is gonna I think he is gonna at least try to come back. I know he's already met with specialists. I think you have to understand the mentality of the athlete, J Mac. And
Yeah.
I've thought a lot about this, right? Because I work with athletes and like all the different guys that I've gotten to know over the years through covering them, through, working with them at the different media places I've worked at. Um, just put yourself in these shoes, right? Okay. Let's say you're so good at something when you are a teenager that it becomes your identity. And then you get to go to college for free for it. And then you
Mm,
become a millionaire because of it. And you've got all of these different ancillary things that come to you in your life because of it. And everything that you are, or so much of what you are, has been based on that, right? On that identity. Okay.
mm,
And then someone comes when you're 32, 33 years old and taps you on the shoulder and says, you can never do this again, right? It's different than basketball and baseball. You can't play football again, right? So somebody taps you on your shoulder, you have more than half your life to live if things go well. And tells you you can never do this thing that's been your identity. You know how hard that is
Yeah,
psychologically?
it's got to be difficult.
Now imagine that happens like at the drop of a hat. There's no runway to it. It happens at the drop of the hat when you're in your 20s. Would you walk away?
Well, I don't know if you, it depends. Are you giving me $137 million?
Right. But I mean, like even like
Well,
that
I
part,
get, yeah,
and I think that's the way all of us reason it, right? Like that's the way that
but
every
we
one of
haven't
us.
been there. Yeah, we
Well,
haven't
that's the way
been.
I mean, like that's my reasoning on it. Like my logic on it is like, shoot, man, take the money and go home and live a
To,
great life. You know what I mean? I think
exactly.
that's what we all think.
He could slide
But
into the booth. He could start a podcast. I mean, he could do a million things.
but
He could coach.
will anything replace for him like running through that tunnel
No.
and being the voice that everybody listens to in the huddle and like every day knowing I'm one of the best in the world that does this? Like will or does he want to keep chasing it? You know? And I just think that's such a hard thing. I would and I know this is on a competitor of yours and I hope you don't have to cut it out. Elijah, if you have to cut this out, I'm sorry. But like I thought Teddy Bruschi brought great insight on it on ESPN the other day, where Teddy said, like explained why he came back from a stroke. And I was covering the Patriots when that happened. And I remember when that happened. And I remember thinking when that I was like, my God, this guy's really trying to come back. Like, why would you do that if you were him?
Mhm.
And that was a guy who had, like had 3 rings. You know what I mean? Like that guy may have had less reason to come back than
Yeah.
than Tua does, you know? And he was older and he had at that point Tua has a family too. But at that point his kids were a little older than Tua's are. So it's just I think it's like a psychologically difficult decision to reckon with for an athlete and something that the rest of us I don't know. I think it's important that we respect like that's something that's
Yeah.
really difficult for the rest of us to relate with.
At the same time, and this is going to come off harsh.
Yeah.
Do you think the league is concerned that he's had so many high profile
Yes.
concussions
Yeah.
that there? I mean, I'm not saying there's a chance he's going to die on the field or something macabre like that, but I think the league has to
Well,
certainly be worried. Like the visions of Tua and these injuries, man. That one at the Bengals game, the one at the Bills where he
yeah.
stood up and then fell down, or against the Bills in Miami. Like these aren't good
Well,
images.
all right. Yeah. I mean, there's two things here. A is a quarterback, right? So it's like different than anything else,
Yeah.
any other position. B, I've covered the NFL for 20 years. I think I've only seen the fencing posture twice. Now, to be fair, I haven't looked for it, but can you remember seeing it in any other athlete, the fencing posture? You know what I'm talking
Mm.
about, right?
There was a Chargers receiver against the Chiefs in the end zone. I'm spacing on his name. It wasn't Palmer. And I think it was last year or 2 years ago. Do you
Was
remember?
it? Okay. Okay. But the
And I
point is
think
this.
maybe he had it.
All
Maybe.
right, so the point is it's rare. It's
Yeah, very.
really in a sport where concussions are common, even in that sport, it's rare. So, I mean, just the visual of that, talking to doctors that the way they term that, it's an involuntary reaction from the brain and indicates a serious brain injury. It's just hearing those words, it's difficult for anybody to kind of like stomach, like, how could that guy go back out there? You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, so I just think, for the league, I think for the league, it's like this has been a human problem for them and also a public relations problem for them. And so I'm sure like everyone in that league office is going to be on pins and needles if he comes back about the idea of it.
Yeah. All right. We'll buzz through a couple early season things. You can say, I know you're a big guy in the league now, obviously, as a reporter insider for Amazon. But we could do something like, are they for real or is this kind of fraudulent Fugazi?
Yeah.
Seattle Seahawks.
I think they're like a good 500 team.
Oh,
I think they're right in there. Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one take here. I think the NFC West has 4 good teams in it. I
oh,
think all 4 of those teams are good teams. I think Seattle has got a collection of second and third year players that most people have missed. Guys like Charles Cross and Abe Lucas and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Boye Mafe and Reek Woolen. It's really the Kenneth Walker. It's the result of the 2 Russell Wilson drafts. They really hit on a lot of guys those 2 years, and those guys are second and third year players now. I think Gino is much better than people realize. I think a lot of people haven't let go of like when
your
you were
tips,
rooting for him.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Um, but I think they're a good 500 team.
And Nuosu's going to be coming back to them later this season
Yep.
too, right? Okay. Arizona Cardinals offense should we expect this to continue?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think like people are now learning why I was screaming from the mountaintops not to overthink things on Marvin Harrison back in the spring because I got to watch him for 3 years and I'm not a scout
Yes.
or a coach. But like I mean, like what I saw on Sunday was what I watched for 3 years. That didn't surprise me. And all due respect to Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, but this is the best receiver prospect in over a decade to come in
100%.
the NFL. And I think he changes the dynamic for them, you know? And they have a left tackle now, too, who they drafted high in the first round last year in Paris Johnson, who also happened to go to my alma mater. And I think I, I think it's interesting. I think Kyler took the video game stuff personally.
Mm,
That's just me talking. But my understanding is he's been a different person in the building since that. And he's really been locked in on learning the offense that he's running now, which is another one of the, it's another like Shanahan-ish style offense, right? Working with Drew Betzing in Minnesota, who Betzing worked under Kubiak in Minnesota and worked under Stefanski in Minnesota
mm.
in Cleveland. And Kyler, if you go back and you look at it, this is the first time he's um had to run a new offense since before high school. Because he ran the air raid in high school, he ran the air raid at A&M and then at Oklahoma. And then he ran the air raid under Cliff his first 4 years in the pros in Arizona. So this is the first time he's had to learn a new offense. So he really took on that challenge. He's been very diligent since the whole thing with the video game stuff. And um, he's been in the building more consistently too. He's been a participant in their off-season program the last 2 years, which he
Mm.
wasn't before. And he played pretty well at the end of last year, if you look at it. And that was without the benefit of any OTAs or mini camp in the spring or training camp in the summer. And with and after having lost, what was it, more than half of the regular season last year. So
Yeah.
I think he's in a good spot. I think they're in a good spot. I think Arizona is right there with Seattle, where I think we're going to turn around in Christmas and around Christmas, and both those teams are still going to be in the hunt.
Yeah. Brian Dable, what's the level of DEFCON 1? It would be he's going to get fired in deep trouble, or you think he's in okay shape? Because he's going to have suitors if they do run him out.
It sounds weird, but I think some of it's going to come down to how he handles the heat getting turned up on him a little. Because I think like
Oh,
the heat, it's not coming internally, but like being in New York, you know
yep.
this. I mean, I would say like that had an effect on the Joe Judge era because the Maras and Tishes they abhor the way they're looked at now, right? Like because they feel like they're the Yankees, right? Like they're the Steelers, they're the Packers, they're this bastion of stability in an otherwise unstable league, right? And they forever have been patient with their coaches and patient with their front office people. They fired coaches after year two 3 times in a row. And the
Jeez.
reason they were a big reason they were reluctant to do it with Judge, and it took that press conference at the end for it actually to happen, is because they didn't want to have it happen a third straight time after it happened with McAdoo and Shermer. And so I the Maras and the Tishes do not want to fire Brian Daboll and Joe Shane. They do
Right.
not want to do that. Um, and I think that there's still like that like he proved it in year one, right? He proved it in winning 13 games. And so, like, I think they believe in the plan. They believe in what's happening here. I guess because it's New York, the heat gets turned up. It can affect the way people operate. Maybe there's a chance, but my guess would be that Dayball survives one way or the other.
Okay. Final question: Jets, Patriots. Aaron Rodgers returns home for hopefully the real first game in New
Yep.
York. Obviously, he lasted 4 snaps last time. Any early thoughts on this game? Patriots look better than advertised through two
Yeah.
games.
I think the Jets have spent a lot of resources in the first 2 weeks trying to establish a running game, and I'm sure you watched that game closely on Sunday. I think you saw signs in the fourth quarter of what they're trying to do, where Braylon Allen breaks the big run at the end. Brees Hall was able to get loose earlier in the game. They want to build a team that doesn't need Aaron Rodgers to be Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers every play, right?
Mm.
So Like I think you've seen that sort of come to light. They're hoping it all comes together on Thursday night, this sort of plan for starting the season and building an identity offensively. Um, and then I think the question on defense is, now what happens with Hassan Reddick with Jermaine Johnson having gone down? Does it
Yeah.
turn up the heat a little on the Jets to get something done? Because that's the strength of their team, right? Is the defensive line, and that's a pretty significant piece getting pulled out. So I'll be interested to see how the Jets pass rush looks and how what the offensive identity is against the Patriots. And I'll also be interested to see if the Patriots, what they've sort of put in place, this like very narrow path to victory that they have to take because of the talent of the roster, right? Which is like shorten the game with the run game, don't ask too much in the passing game, and win on defense.
Yeah.
We'll see how that translates again. I think against what I think is like the best opponent, the I don't think it'll end up being the best opponent, but they got a weakened version of the Bengals and they got like a
Yeah.
pretty good, not great Seahawks team. I think this is a different type of challenge, and it'll be interesting to see how they
Yeah.
stand up to it.
I'm worried about the Jets defense, man. Can't stop the run.
Yeah,
The injuries are mounting. Mosley. I don't know. This just
you're
feels like a
worried.
16-13 game. Yeah, and you can't lose to the freaking Patriots.
Cannot.
You can't. All right, Albert Breer, SI, Amazon. He's everywhere. He's blowing up if that's even possible. And his Ohio State Buckeyes should be number one, but they're two behind Texas.
Oh, thanks
By the
for
way,
saying that. Are you just saying that
Carson.
because I'm here?
Yeah, basically. No, I have a ticket on them to win the title. Carson Beck, real quick. I'm sorry. I have not seen anything resembling number one overall pick. And I
Yeah.
don't care that he's 6'4", 220 and with a big arm. I don't care. I need to see more. I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, me too. I think this is still I think this year, I think we're sort of scratching, and it's going to be like who emerges. Like this is an actual, like last year, I think like Caleb was the leader in the clubhouse from
Yes.
the start. We knew Drake May was going to be a top three pick. Like Jaden Daniels sort of came out of nowhere, but we knew about him. You know what I mean? Like
McCarthy kind of came on strong.
yeah, so like I think with this year's different in that I don't think any of those guys we've been talking about at the top, whether it's Shador Sanders, Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, whoever you want to talk about up in that top group, I don't think any of them are assured of going that high. I
Cam
think
Ward.
all of them need to play really well to get there.
What about Cam Ward? Miami. Have
I
you
don't
seen
know.
enough or?
No, not yet. Not
Okay.
yet. Need
He's
to see
older,
more from him.
but
Because I think you found out what the NFL thought of him last year.
do we know what grade he got when he tried to enter and then
Well, I mean, like what the NFL thought of him last year is why he wound up back in school after I think he actually declared for the draft,
yeah.
right? So he got some advice not to do it, and there's reason why. So I still think he has some more to prove, but obviously he's off to a good start too.
Is there other stuff I don't know about off field or?
No, 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 no,
Oh,
no, no. Like nothing off field. I think the bidding process to go and get him in NIL was very interesting. And it's something he will be asked about by NFL teams, but nothing nefarious or
well, wait,
crazy.
what was interesting?
I
Just
mean,
who was involved?
yeah, I just put it this way. I think that there were several agents that were competing for his to have him as a client. And
Okay.
it was I do know some of the college programs thought it had turned into a little bit of a circus. That's
Oh,
it's not like
understandable.
just it's
Well, that's
not
fair.
just like a bidding war. It's like there were people were being contacted by different people on behalf of him,
No, that's not
which
great.
was sort of interesting,
But that's young. I'll just say
But he's a
this:
young guy. He's a young guy. He's a young guy who's learning his way. Yeah.
Miami won out, and like, listen, Riley Leonard at Notre Dame. I'm sorry, I don't even think he's an early round pick. Like, I've seen less than nothing from him, and I know the tools are there, but I'm optimistic on Cam Ward when I just watch him play. I haven't
Yeah.
broken down
No,
any
he's looked
past
good. He's looked good. Will Howard too,
confident.
right?
Oh, stop it! Goodness gracious, no, not Will Howard. All right, Albert Breer, take it easy. Thanks a lot, buddy.
All right. Thanks, J Mac.